From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is Road Signs. Here is your host, Mike Fries.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Road Signs, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going back to Nashville, which was the site of the Technology and Maintenance Council's annual meeting last month. The technician-based conference gave plenty of opportunity to speak with today's industry leaders. As the macro issues of tariffs and emission regulations dominate the space, we wanted to take a look to see the direction of the auto technician industry and where it's headed. So for this episode, we'll ask the question, what areas can the technician segment prosper the most, and how can those goals be met? For the answer, we'll speak with two people who could address this. We'll chat with Radu Mihai, Corporate Fleet Manager of Born Cove Rock Products out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Currently, he is the TMC Chairman and Treasurer, and we'll discuss the present and the future of the technician. But first, we'll speak with Brian Antonellis, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for Fleet Advantage, about the overall picture of the industry, its strategy, and analysis. Let's take a listen.
Welcome to Road Signs, here at the ATA TMC annual meeting here in Nashville, Tennessee. And we have a very special guest with us, a regular friend of the show. We haven't spoken to him for a while, but we are definitely going to dive into some subjects about the trucking industry and mainly fleet maintenance. We are going to speak with Brian Antonellis. He is the Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for Fleet Advantage. Brian, a pleasure to have you here again.
Glad to be back. This is what we do at TMC now.
Yes, we do. Well, I wanted to say it was like 2 years ago last time I saw you, but actually I saw you last year.
Yep.
We just kind of bumped into each other at the Peterbilt event.
You're right.
We enjoyed Def Leppard, by the way. Don't be jealous. But seriously, we have a lot to talk about since the last time, 2 years ago when we spoke at TMC. But before we get into all of that, let's get to the very hot topic, and it might just change by the time this gets on the air. But let's talk about tariffs. There was one thing you had mentioned pre-show about those who don't think the tariffs are going to affect them, those in the industry with their truck, but there's another warning you wanted to heed toward that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard it around the show a few times. I don't have to worry about tariffs. My trucks are being built in the U.S. While that's true for the truck in its entirety, regardless of where the truck is built, components come in from overseas. So you may have a tariff that isn't 100%. You might not see the 15 or 20% that you would see on the news when you're watching it.
Yes.
But you may see a individual component. It's probably multiple components of that unit are going to have some sort of tariff cost applied. So if they don't get pushed off and if they go into effect, you're going to see some change to the end cost of your vehicle.
In the face of uncertainty, some things remain steady, like the Cummins 2027 X15, built on 25 plus years of experience and delivering up to 4% better fuel efficiency in a weight-neutral system. The X15 gives you the strength to move forward fearlessly and confidence that no matter the obstacle, you can and will rise above it. The 2027 X15, forever rising. Estimates based on preliminary testing. Individual results may vary.
Just the whole uncertainty of that. I just want to talk about that because this could all change by tomorrow or next week.
Right.
What are the conversations you're having with those who believe that it's not going to touch them or it may touch them minimally? What are the things that you're telling them?
For us, it all goes back to what's your asset management plan? If you go back in this industry a few years, really pre-COVID, everybody ordered the year before. We did capital planning in Q3, Q4. You ordered your trucks, they delivered the next year. It's been so disruptive since COVID. So we've really pushed that 3 to 5 year strategy. So when we see tariffs increase and we see an additional cost, we can talk about, is that going to lower the number of trucks you're going to be able to purchase? What percentage of that, is it going to be? What's going to get pushed out to next year? Should we hold on and say, no, we understand, we still got to push through this? And we're seeing it in the alternative vehicle space as well. I mean, batteries, many components come from other countries. So it's all about having your plan. And when we get these curveballs, ACF was taken out a few weeks ago. What did that do? What did it change for the customers? If you have that 3 to 5 year plan, you're making small course corrections along the way and not trying to reinvent yourself and understand the cost every single time something happens. That's what we're pushing is we're going to see some turbulent times, tariffs, regulation, alternative fuels. You got to have that long-term plan, make small course corrections, and don't get all worked up every time something new comes our way.
Definitely. Even without the tariff cloud, we were discussing regulations, and just that hubbub is its own monster.
It got quieted down once the tariff talk started, but really seeing ACF go away, and we see the push to maybe change ACT, maybe eliminate ACT. Probably the comment I say to our customers the most is, if you don't think you're going to see curveballs over the next 2 or 3 years, you're absolutely wrong. So let's prepare and understand what those curveballs are going to cost you. So if you decide to limit the number of trucks we're going to acquire this year because of a tariff or a cost increase, what's going to happen? If you run a truck a year older, that's going to increase your cost, maybe 5, 6, 7 cents per mile increase. Right. So let's understand what those pushes and pulls are. You may be better off paying a little bit more for a truck this year and seeing the reduction in maintenance and fuel from a new asset, or we don't want to just defer the truck because it went up $1,500 or $1,800. Right. So let's have all that mapped out. Let's have your next 2, 3, 4 year plan set, and then let's make some reasonable decisions that put you in the best place to run your fleet.
We're talking about uncertainty. Let's kind of change gears into things a little more certain. Fleet Advantage had just released the Truck Life Cycle Index. For those who don't know, could you give a brief explanation of what the index tells?
So really who we are and what we do is understanding life cycle and understanding the costs as a vehicle evolves. We think the number one thing you can do to have your total lowest cost of ownership is being able to understand your life cycle, understand what part of your life cycle you're in, and replace that asset at the correct time. As we're talking to our customers, it's all about, do you understand your data? Do you understand how your fuel economy improves with a new app and then slowly starts to degrade over time? And really where you are in that maintenance curve. You'll see a cost per mile from 2 cents per mile in year 1 for maintenance up to somewhere between 12 to 20 cents per mile based on your approach and how you're going to maintain your vehicle. Deferring a year or extending a truck a few years can be really expensive. At the same time, you don't want to cycle out too early because you're leaving low cost miles on the table. So everything we do, the index, how we plan, our strategy around tariffs, all revolves around understanding the life cycle, understanding where you are in that life cycle, and making sure that you have the data and the plan in place to be able to react appropriately.
Okay, well, let's discuss what owners and managers are doing to realize those savings when upgrading to a model year 2026. How do they achieve that balance of having upgraded equipment but not losing the efficiency from the previous model?
Great question. A lot of people have come up to us and said, we're struggling to plan. But the first thing you got to do is understand how your existing fleet is running. If you think we'll start from a cost per mile from a fuel standpoint, right? When a truck comes in, you're getting optimal fuel efficiency in the first 1, 2, 3, 4 years, probably up to 400,000 miles. Then you start to see some degradation. As the equipment gets a little bit, the engine gets a little bit looser, it's heading towards the end of its life. But what's happened in the industry when that is going on? The average trucks are improving 2% a year. By the time you get to year 4, a new model truck is getting about 2, 3, 4% better than what your existing truck is getting. And now your truck starts to decline a little bit, right? And then from a R&M standpoint, the curve, you watch it and see the steady curve from 2 cents in year 1, 4 to 6 cents in year 2, right up to by the time you get to year 5 or year 6, you're somewhere between 15 and 20 cents per mile. And that's really exploded over the past couple of years because what we've seen is, since the introduction of the emission systems, yes, they've become more reliable, but they're also really expensive. So when you start getting into maintaining your DPF system, filters, housings, 1 box, we went to a 2 box, now we're going back to a 1 box with these new emissions regulations. Managing all that, the end of life over 500,000 miles really escalates from a cost standpoint.
Okay. I'm kind of interested with heavy duty trucking.
Sure.
But just from size-wise, the smaller mid fleets, what kind of improvement strategies which type of, with the larger fleets or mid-size, what type of truck, I guess, would fare out better in a replacement strategy? I guess my question is, I'm sorry.
I don't think it's one of, we're OEM agnostic, right? So certain OEMs have customers and work types or vocations that they cater to, right?
Okay.
And we certainly look at that. But what we're trying to do is take all that data, so we talk about cost per mile and R&M, and model out how is it going to change. So we have billions of lines of data. We understand what a Freightliner, Volvo, in that application, we break them down into verticals: grocery haul, beverage, right? Whatever the vocation of work that they're doing, we'll break them down We'll take that data of how their equipment's performing today, and then we build it out. So when you say, how do they get their efficiency? No CFO or leader of an organization is going to want to say, trust me, my trucks are going to perform better. But when you can look at your existing performance, model it out from a cost per mile standpoint, an MPG standpoint, and then show a true replacement over the next several years and the productivity enhancements that you'll gain by that, you start to realize that gaining fuel economy, gaining R&M, going back to year one maintenance, easily offsets the additional cap cost or recapitalization of the vehicle. And making sure you time that correctly can save your trucks thousands of dollars per asset over their life cycle, right? So it's all about having the data, building the plan, understanding when truck X comes out and truck Y goes in, what's that going to do to your P&L? And getting down to that level so you can have a truck level P&L. And then of course we can look at the verticals and the vocation of the truck to understand where they're running, how they're running, and what OEM would be best for them.
Okay.
And then you get into the fun stuff where my team just loves it, where you start talking about vehicle spec. So are you running 100,000 miles a year, you're running 50,000 miles a year, you're stopping 20 times a day. So everything down to what's the tires you're running, what's the drive line you're running, what size engine, 11 liter, 13 liter, 15 liter, and you can get into where are you located and where's the best customer support, who has the biggest dealer network. Once you can get to that point, and you can fundamentally say, managing your life cycle is going to save you money, and it's going to help you adapt to these curveballs that are coming. You're in a great position to be able to go deep and get into the weeds and understand all those smaller factors. But it starts with having the data, setting a replacement cycle, understanding how it's going to affect your P&L, and then be able to build out who is going to support you best through that whole process.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the procurement process is very data-driven. I mean,
it has to be.
Yes. And just in your conversation, especially when you're talking from a multi-year perspective, what are some of those pain points that your customers are feeling when they're in that process of the procurement process?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, they want to jump to what's the new piece of equipment going to cost me. Start with how you're performing now. Let's get a good solid baseline of how your fleet is performing today, and then let's project what it's going to look like, and then we can do all the fun stuff. We can go out and look at the truck, talk to your drivers, figure out what sort of seat package you want, what tires, what dealers you want to work with, and how we're going to set you up with a strong maintenance plan. But they want to jump to looking at where you're going. Let's look at how you're performing today. By looking at how you're performing today, it really gives you the ability so you have a curveball come your way and they say tariffs are going to raise each truck price, and I'm going to use a made up number here, $5,000.
Okay.
And you say, well, I only had X number of millions of dollars approved. I need to defer the purchase or acquisition of 10 trucks. Well, do you really? Because if you're trying to save money, let's look at what the productivity that you're going to lose from an MPG and an R&M standpoint, and let's balance that out and make sure you make an informed decision. It may make the best sense to defer. It might make the best sense to have that conversation. We always try to have the conversations move up and down the organization. When we have operations and finance on the same page, and we're talking and agreeing on the same set of numbers, that's when you can get broad agreement on an asset strategy. It's not just the operations team bringing it to finance and hoping they say yes. Include them in the conversation. Let's start at the beginning. Let's allow them to vet the data with us. Let's build a projection that they feel comfortable with. And then when these curveballs come, whether it's ACF, maybe you want to put more trucks in California now. Right. Maybe you want to shift to a different OEM because they have carb credits. Maybe you want to do a lot of those things, but you'll understand the impact of each of your decisions because you already have the base work done.
Do you anticipate the cost-benefit ratio of replacing the older trucks? Do you think it will continue to improve?
I think it will. When you look at the more complexity that goes into a truck, and the older it is, the more the costs rise. We've seen it with emissions now for 10 plus years. As soon as you get to that 400 to 500,000 mile standpoint, those emissions costs start to rise. The one open item that I think we're all trying to figure out is there going to be a warranty component to 2027 EPA/CARB? That's still open. At this point, they're projecting a $25,000 cost increase on a 2027 calendar year, 2028 model year truck. And really that $25,000 cost increase is two pieces. It's about half warranty and half new technology. So where does that warranty piece fit into this change in regulation and ACF changing and ACT. We'll have to figure out what happens there. Managing life cycle and understanding how it goes through its curve from an MPG and an R&M standpoint. I think that the more expensive and the complex they get, if you miss that target replacement cycle, it could be tens of thousands of dollars a year to keep that asset more than you need to spend.
Okay, let's change gears to workforce development. That was the bulk of the conversation we had the last time.
Sure.
And there's always that retention issue. And 2 years later from our conversation, that issue is still prevalent. Why is that? I know you're not going to give the silver bullet answer, but why does that issue still linger and not be neutralized?
Well, I think we're in an industry that's been extremely reactive for the last 5+ years. And then you throw into that the technology change that's happened. So it's been very hard to attract and retain technicians and drivers. And organizations have done a great job of trying to, I think last time we talked a lot about treating them like a professional.
Yes.
Right? The way they go to work, their tools, their technology, they need to be treated like someone you want to retain. And I think the industry's done a great job at that. Where I think we're still challenged is training. Dealerships are backed up. Independent repair facilities are backed up. Struggle to get some of our equipment off lease as we work through that process. And with them being backed up, when do you take that time to say, okay, I'm not going to fix this truck today that's been sitting out there for a week. I'm going to pull that technician out and teach them about the new TBF systems. Teach them about the changes to the engines to meet 24 and 27 emissions regulations. And that's always a challenge, right? When do we pause and say we're going to let the customer sit, train, which puts us in better position going forward, but it doesn't make it challenging now, right? Because we have a customer waiting another day. So I think we have a training challenge now. We've brought in some great talent into the industry. We've been able to extend the career of many of our current technicians and drivers. But how are we going to take the men and women who've been working here for the last 10 or 15 years and train them up in the new technology? And how do we bring in the newcomers to the industry and get them through 10 or 15 years of training pretty quick?
You know what? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely.
No, I remember you were well, not talking about that, but the efficiency of a new hire. And you said that was somewhere around 75 to 80% of efficiency. Just having that foundation, what you were just saying, just coaching them up,
sure,
to be a better seasoned veteran technician. Have you seen any strategies that really made that protocol, for lack of a better word, help in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really about, can you take that time? Think about it. If you're a large organization, you have 1,000 technicians, and you have a massive change in technology. Well, now everybody's a new technician.
Right.
So the productivity of your entire 1,000 technician group drops to 75%. Right. So what's your training strategy to get them up to where they need to be? What we've seen is investing in training headcount so they can go out to the facilities and work with them, pulling them out of the facility and sending them to a third party. Listen, you get a lot out of that and you learn that expertise, but they're gone for a week. So being able to invest in in-house technologies and in-house people to be able to go out and do that training. Same thing with drivers, as they're on, sending them out to a third party is challenging. So having that resource is great. And then also, and this is the hardest part, I probably have 2 or 3 examples of large companies that have done a fantastic job at it. Maybe you have to staff at 110% instead of 100%, because you need to create that time within their work schedules and create that head count to focus on improving their proficiency as they go through it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because my next question was about mentorship and how that all plays into it.
I started in this industry back in the 90s. That was almost the first thing that happened to me. I was paired up with someone in the shop and they said, he's going to help you work through each of these. We had a sign-off process and I had to get certified to do brakes or work on an engine or work in the parts department. But there really was that connection to the legacy employees and the older employees in the organization. Same thing with drivers. They team them up, go out to the customer together. As we went through the 2000s and people focused on productivity, and we really did from 2000 to 2020, we didn't really have any disruptions in trucking. They were very minor. So people drove out additional headcount. People sort of leaned out their organization, and I think we lost that. Coming out of COVID, I've seen it coming back, which gets me really excited because you see some of that knowledge start being able to be passed on, and talked about them being at a 75% proficiency level.
Yes.
You can bring in a trainer, but if the person that you're working next to, your fellow driver, your fellow technician, is able to walk over to you and say, hey, before you remove this component, Let me show you an easier way. You could look at it and say, well, you're losing that other technician or driver on their job, but that information that they're about to pass along, showing them how to go into the laptop and see the procedure, understanding that if you use type of ratchet or this type of tool, you can drastically reduce it. When that starts to build, you take that maybe a 2 or 3 year training time and shorten it to a year. So yes, you had to invest in that extra time or headcount to be able to do that. But absolutely, I think as this industry, goes through its next round of challenges with the emissions and regulations, everybody is starting to remember, let's help out our fellow person. Let's figure out how to team them up. Let's make them successful. Every time you turn a driver or a mechanic, it costs you so much money. So what can we do to keep them? One sort of math problem I always talk about when they say, well, if a technician leaves an organization, maybe you were paying him $40 an hour. He leaves, you're saving $40 an hour. But the work that's replacing what he did is probably at a dealer or outsourced, and it's probably $150 an hour. So it costs you $90 an hour. So when you're thinking about how to treat your employees, how to train your employees, how to retain your employees, the cost of them leaving and you having that open role far exceeds any small amount of time where you're going to pair them up with a fellow coworker, invest in their training. Because it may take you a month or two to replace that technician.
Okay.
That's tens of thousands of dollars because you didn't want to spend a couple $100 facilitating training or mentorship.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned, just hourly wage. But even beyond that, for today's technician, I mean, the more years we go out, we're going to have a new generation of folks into the technician, But what does a total compensation package look like for today's technician?
I remember when I first started, I referenced the 90s, and I'm probably dating myself here. If you were in the high teens and with good health care, good benefits, you felt like you were in a pretty good spot. We quickly blew through the 20s, we were moving through the 30s, and you're seeing technicians, even on an hourly perspective, being the $30 to $40 an hour range. You push that out as a salary, they typically work overtime. Just on a salary in 40 hours, you're close to $80,000 a year, with probably 30% as a benefits package. So they're making well over $100,000 a year, and I don't see that number slowing down. As the complexity continues to ramp up in these pieces of equipment, it's amazing what type of person first starts with a laptop, does a formal diagnosis, moves into having to check electrical components, and then can still replace the component. Know what you have to do to get it fixed right the first time. And then when you see outside labor rates be anywhere between $125 and $175, there's a real value to having technicians that help support your equipment.
My last question, Brian, is in essence to that compensation. I want to talk about the innovative strategies that some fleets are using to keep their techs. Have you seen that, and what are some of those strategies that you think other fleets should follow?
So we've seen one area that makes a ton of sense, right? And just if you or I, going through our careers, we want to know how we progress in our existing career. We don't want to get bored. We want to see additional challenges. So don't technicians. We're talking about training them up, helping them move their career and become extremely proficient. You need to pay them for it. You need to set goals for them. Having some sort of tiered system as they move through their career, whether it's a technician, a senior technician, level 1, 2, 3, however you want to define it. There should be compensation attached to that. As you become efficient, as you become more valuable to the organization, pay is recognized, and then helping them move through that, and doing it in a way where they truly believe that you're there to help them progress their career. 90% of technicians that I know that have left, this isn't a fact that's published, this is Brian percentages here, right? 90% of technicians leave and go to a similar job, working in a similar space, working on similar equipment. So why did they leave? They left because they either didn't have a connection with their employer, or they didn't feel like there's a way for them to grow. Right? They want to be able to grow their compensation, they want to be able to grow their training, and when you can put that effort in to help them and help them see results, we see retention rates really skyrocket. We get out of that churn, which is extremely difficult. We bring cost stability to the fleet, and everybody, the technician, the drivers, and the company is in a better position.
I kind of want to follow up to that with, you were saying compensation and training, the reasons why some techs leave. Is it like a 50-50 balance of that, or is it more, training than compensation?
I think it's the word you just said, balance.
Okay.
Right? So if I asked you to go to training for the next 3 months, you became 10 times better at your job, you're bringing more value to the company, and my compensation doesn't align with that, you're going to feel like the company isn't as connected to you as they should be. They don't understand what you're doing. They don't understand where you're in your career. So short of just having an annual review and saying you're going to get X percentage increase, that's good. That's a cost of living increase. But as your proficiency improves, as you become a better technician, you should have those pay increases that correspond to that activity. So when you get out of training and you prove your proficiency and drive value to the company, let's pull that technician aside and say, hey, you've reached this point here. We're going to compensate you for that. And here's the next goal we want you to work towards. It's not an annual process. It's a multi-step process. You should initiate the conversation. Sit them down and say, hey, I care about you. I care about your career. I know you have personal and financial goals that you want to achieve. We want to help you achieve them. So here's a path that we've laid out where you can look at the different milestones. Here's the training resources that we're going to apply to this. We want you to help move through this process. When you do that, you make a great connection with your employee. Technicians feel like they're connected. They start to care about how their proficiency affects the results of the organization. Companies that do that have little or no turnover. They have retirements, they don't have turnover.
That's a great way to put a bow on this conversation. We've been speaking with Brian Antonellis, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for Fleet Advantage. Brian, it was a pleasure having you on.
Pleasure to see you again.
In the face of uncertainty, some things remain steady, like the Cummins 2027 X15, built on 25 plus years of experience and delivering up to 4% better fuel efficiency in a weight-neutral system. The X15 gives you the strength to move forward fearlessly and confidence that no matter the obstacle, you can and will rise above it. The 2027 X15, forever rising. Estimates based on preliminary testing. Individual results may vary.
For today's guest, we have someone very special. He is the corporate fleet manager of Bornco Rock Products in Calgary, Alberta. But when he steps into his superhero costume, which will be the incoming chairman and treasurer of the council, we present to you Radu. Radu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
The incoming chairman, usually the ones that I speak to, they have somewhat of a theme, for their chairmanship. Amanda Schuler had expressed the engagement. Randy Obermeyer, root cause analysis. Radu, what is your agenda or theme for your chairmanship?
Well, Mike, thank you for your question. Actually, my theme is called Ensure Trucking's Future Success. Mm-hmm. Okay, Ensure Trucking Future Success.
Okay, all right. All in tell.
I would say it is a mix. Hopefully, it's a happy mix between technology, servicing equipment, maintenance, leadership skills. It takes a lot of things to keep a trucking operation running. It's not just equipment. Maintenance plays a big role in that too. And when it comes to maintenance, guess who's doing that? It's humans, right? We have to be respectful and careful of those guys' needs. A happy employee is a productive employee.
One thing that you said that I thought was noted was the way that technology has improved and the innovations happen over time. The time that it takes to train the tech to fix those parts is becoming longer as well. And that goes a lot into the teaching and learning that underlies this theme. What strategies have you seen that could really help speed up that timeline, or is it just a learning experience that tech has to go through?
Well, technology has gotten more and more complex, more complicated, tighter and tighter sensors, emissions. When it comes to trucking industry, the emissions reductions over the last 25, 30 years, since the first EGR was introduced compared to mid-1990s truck is critical. It's crazy, right? But what it means, it means that anything goes wrong in the engine, the after-treatment system more or less acts like a one-time troubleshooting tool. And if something goes wrong, it's gonna tell you something went wrong, but it can be expensive to fix. You just don't upload a new version of software. So in order to avoid getting into that corner, into that rabbit hole, we need to have good mechanics. We need to have people that understand the technology, they understand how they work, they can troubleshoot the first time, so trucks have the proper dispatch reliability. For a mechanic to be proficient in the shop in 2025, the skill set is very different than that required in 1995, let's say. It takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of troubleshooting equipment. You actually need years to develop that skill set. And sometimes specific to the fleet. Fleets that operate in different environments have different needs and see different problems.
And that ties into many of the issues that technicians face, the people that supervise them, retention and recruitment. One of the main drivers for techs to leave an operation is the lack of training or not feeling valued enough. That goes into the pay as well. In your experience, how can, fleet operators such that situation where, they kind of have that dynamic that they have to play with, just sort of, they want to build their techs up, but, also in building them up, they have to pay them more, and you kind of have that conflict. What are some of the things that you've seen in that regard and how operators and owners are combating that?
Well, Mike, I would say every fleet that runs a maintenance shop, they have to find a happy medium. I truly believe you need to take care of your people, and your people take care of you and your equipment indirectly. If you don't train them, they don't feel they're part of that. People generally like leadership, they want leadership. Some may not be able to articulate that, but people follow leadership. So pay them right, train them right, give them the tools to succeed, and just get out of their way.
Well, let's switch gears to the personal side. Being a chairman of the TMC does require a journey. You've become the chair for the S3 study group, Engine and Motors, and that's a pretty important group. So from that, Robert Braswell has said that you're a very intelligent guy and you have excellent analytical, critical thinking skills. That'll definitely help in that regard. But if you could just tell the story of your journey here, just kind of how you started out into the council and how you rose up from the board of directors to now the chairman. How did that journey go?
Well, Mike, I guess when I first came to TMC, it must have been 2010, let's say, was in Tampa. And it was also my first time in Tampa, which is a different discussion. Back then, I was much younger. I actually had a lot more hair than now. And you and I share something in common, I guess.
Yeah, same barber.
Exactly. So when I first attended TMC and I went to one of them full tech sessions, first I was shocked, impressed by how many people were in the audience. I was also impressed by how many people with white hair. Some had less hair, but a lot of white hair. Those guys knew something, and they still came to TMC. On one hand, I was looking at the fellas in red jackets, like the fancy one, and I was looking at those like gods. Oh my God. Okay. With all these people in the audience to actually make it to the top, you must be somebody, right? At the same time, I started coming to TMC for recommended practices to understand what I didn't know. I was smart enough to know I don't know everything. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And some people may have heard me say that before. It's very important to admit you don't know everything. You have to be on a quest to fill in those blanks. If you think you know everything, good luck with that. It's never the case. So coming back to my journey, 2010, humbling experience. I realized there are lots of things I don't know. By trade, I'm an automotive engineer, and I mean with that comes a bit of cockiness. It was humbling seeing the difference between what I thought. Sometimes in our own minds we are also heroes.
Yes.
Well, when rubber meets the road, that doesn't count as much. The heroes are actually there, whether they're mechanics or drivers. But let's go back to your question. I was fortunate enough that my employer at the time was supportive of that, so I kept coming back. Then, slowly but surely, I got myself involved with S3, the engine study group. And soon, I ended up being first vice chair. The way study groups work, you have a chairman. You may have seen the guys in the blue jacket. Then you have vice chairs. First vice chairs, and first vice chairs have to be fleets. And you have second vice chairs, which are the blue badges. Me, being fortunate enough to have a yellow badge as a fleet, I was accepted as a first vice chair. Back then, the engine study group, S3, was probably one of the top study groups of TMC. S3 still is one of the top study groups in TMC. But for me to be accepted into that role, it was a bit of a validation, but also a steep learning curve. Both in terms of technical information, things that I didn't know, but also in old school tricks, and also in leadership. You may find odd to find an engineer talk about leadership as much, but it's true. I'm smart enough to understand what I didn't know back then. And leadership skills, leadership traits are as important as actual training. There is an old adage, hire for potential and train for skills. So the potential comes first.
One of the things that Amanda said about you was that you have in common the love and application of leadership skills in general. You both share that quality. You being chairman and talking to those past, chair people, have they gave you some advice on how to navigate this busy year you're going to be having?
Okay, if Amanda said it, she's probably right. Once.
Yeah.
Second, I did get a lot of advice, past chairman or not. speak slow. And I'm trying to rehearse that as you and I are talking about. But all joking aside, yes, you are correct. These guys have become my friends and mentors. Anytime I have a question, I have somebody to pick up the phone, call a guy, you will get an answer. It may not be the answer you want or like, but they will give you what they think is the answer. And that, nowadays, it's invaluable. I did get this advice from quite a few people I have a lot of respect for. Empathy. Pay attention to the guy. Try to see it through a third party's eyes. Collaboration. Work together. Whoever comes to see you, whoever approaches you, be respectful of the person's time. Try to give him the time. We're all busy. We all have things to do, but it's important. Don't neglect anybody. Especially TMC, when you wear a red jacket, most people in the audience see you as an important person, right? And reflective of TMC overall. You have to be respectful. You have to help the guys. You have to give them the genuine feeling that the person is appreciated and needed.
Okay. My final question is, the moment you realized that you were becoming the chairman, what was that like with your friends, your mentors, your colleagues? Were you just getting inundated with email and well wishes? And what was that moment like?
Well, probably the following 30 minutes to an hour, that's exactly what happened. But if you ask me what happened immediately after, you actually have one of those aha moments and say, damn, should I had my hand up or not? I know a lot of people that cheer for me, that were very supportive of me, and I hope I do a good job and I won't disappoint them because they put a lot of faith in me. And the guys before me, big shoes to fill,
Yeah.
Really big shoes to fill.
But I'm pretty sure you're up for the task.
Well, Michael, thank you very much.
No problem. We've been speaking with Radu Mihai, the incoming chairman and treasurer of the TMC. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our previous question. What areas can the technician segment prosper the most, and how can those goals be met? First, a big thanks to Brian Antonellis and Radu Mihai for joining us for this special edition of Road Signs. In our conversations, we learned that the struggles of hiring and keeping technicians is ever present. Both men explained this problem in the macro sense. Antonellis noted the importance of training to bridge the gap for incoming technicians, which has been a major factor in techs leaving for other positions. Mihai strikes a balance between learning advanced strategies and a deep dive of the basics. Both emphasized that in order for technicians to become successful, the work has to be done to cultivate the right atmosphere, which is proper training, competitive pay, and a supportive mentoring system that helps techs nurture a career versus working a job. If you enjoyed this episode of Road Signs, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Feel free to reach out to the Road Signs team on X at TT Road Signs, or reach me at Michael V. Freeze. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. Also, let us know how we're doing by texting TT Survey to 571-622-0001. And of course, we'll be back soon with a new episode of Road Signs. Until then, I'm Michael Freeze. Thank you for listening.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.